All right, today we're going to do some transformations of functions. So remember, transformations is any time you move a graph, you translate it, you shift it over, you flip it, you make it bigger, you make it smaller. You change the graph in some shape or way. So our learning target is I can describe a transformation. So let's talk about some different functions. So linear, you should know, is just going to be a straight diagonal line and it has a positive slope, something like that. So this is what we call the parent function of the linear. So nothing has happened to it. This is just the most simple linear function you can think of. Quadratic is when you have the U-shaped curve, a parabola. It's always going to look like it's smiling. It's a happy little curve. That's a quadratic. You should be familiar with that. Cubic might be a little new for you. It's called a cubic because it has x cubed. That's it's not impressive, sorry. It kind of looks like a roller coaster, I think. So something like this. Absolute value. So absolute value is when it looks like a V-shaped graph. So it kind of looks like just something like this. Usually the vertex is going to be right there at 0, 0. Okay, a radical, or you could call this a square root function. It kind of looks like a heel, so it's going to like start, and it's going to kind of looks like it's leveling off, and then rational. I don't know how familiar you are with rationals, but we'll do a whole unit on them, and you will be sick of this if you're not already. These are kind of crazy looking. They look like this. They kind of like almost like a U-shaped curve, but like reflected over, so they'll be like two separate parts. These graphs are never going to hit the X or Y axis, and we'll talk about why that is in a later unit. Okay, so those are your main functions, and then these are your transformation rules. So anytime I say A, I'm referring to if there is a number in front of a parenthesis. So if there's a number in front of the parenthesis, if it's negative, the function flips over the x-axis. If the number is greater than 1, it'll be stretched vertically. And if the number is between 0 and 1, it'll be compressed vertically. Alright, so if there is a number in front of a parenthesis, these are the three things that can happen. Alright, so if there is a parenthesis or an absolute value bar, or just think if there is a number in front of x, here's the things that can happen. If that number is greater than 1, we say it's compressed horizontally. If that number is between 0 and 1, we say it's stretched horizontally. Okay, so right after the x, if there is a number inside a parenthesis or inside a square root function or inside absolute value, if it's inside but it's after x, here's what can happen. If that number is positive, it's going to move the function to the left. If that number is negative, it's going to move it to the right. And this one, it kind of happens opposite of what you think. So if it's positive, it's going to move it to the left. If it's negative, it's going to move it to the right. And I'm going to show you some examples. If there's a number at the very end, so not inside parentheses, not inside anything, just at the very end tacked on, if that number is positive, it's going to move the function up. If that number is negative, it's going to move it down. Okay, so these are the things to look for. So there's 4 places a number could be, and it would change the graph. So we're going to look at some examples. Okay, anytime you see this word parent function, that's the original. That means nothing has happened. So the original absolute value function looks like this. And if you'll notice, its vertex is at 0, 0. Okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to graph the transformation. So if you have access to a calculator, a graphing calculator, awesome. If not, you can go to desmos.com/calculator, type this in, or you could always make you a little XY value chart. So go ahead and graph that. So here's what the transformation graph looks like. You can notice it's definitely changed. If you look at the vertex only, you'll notice that it has been moved to the left and down. Also, the graph has been stretched in some sort of way. So let's look at those numbers, 2, 3, and -4, and let's be very specific on what that did to the graph. So you can go back and look at that chart where we color-coded stuff, if that helps. So the chart says if there's a number in front of a parenthesis or in front of an absolute value or something, that 2, that's that A we were referring to. So if A is bigger than 1, that 2 means this graph has been stretched vertically. So if you think about it, it's like it's been pulled up and down. That's why it looks taller and skinnier. If you look at the 3, it's happened after the X, so that's your H value. So in H is 3, if it's positive, it moves it to the left. So that 3 right there, it means it moved 3 units to the left. And then the last one is the 4, and that's your K value. That's at the very end. So anything at the very end, after a parenthesis, after an absolute value, after something is your K value. And if K is negative, it moves it down. So this means it moved down 4 units. Oh, I didn't put the word down. It moved 4 units up and right here, down. And that even makes sense if you look at our vertex. It went from 0, 0 to -3, -4. It moved 3 units to the left, 4 down. It also got skinnier, so it was stretched vertically. So that's how you describe a transformation. You tell what all 3 of those numbers have done. And notice we wrote out 3 things. It stretched vertically because of the 2. It moved 3 units to the left because of the 3. It moved 4 units down because of the 4. So we had 3 phrases to say because there were 3 numbers. So let's do another one. So parent means original. We know that an original x squared is a parabola. So I want you to go ahead and graph the original and graph the transformation. Okay, so here's the original. It had a vertex at 0, 0. And then, so the vertex has moved to 1, 3. Alright, so it definitely has shifted. And it even has flipped over. Okay, and so I underlined the 3 different numbers, and we can talk about those, and you can look back at that chart if it'll help you. So there's an understood -1, this is a -1, in front of the parentheses, so that's your A value. So when A has a number, if it is negative, that means it flipped over the x-axis. Flipped over x-axis. So that's what the -1 did. Okay, now let's look at what the -1 after the x did. So anytime it's after the x, but it's inside parentheses or something, that is your H value. And if you look at the chart, it says if H is negative, it moves it to the right. So this has moved 1 unit to the right. And then the last thing is that 3. So that is our K value because it's at the very end. And if you look at the chart, it says if K is positive, it moves it up. So this has moved up 3 units. There were 3 numbers. They did 3 different things. The -1 at the beginning made it flip over the x-axis. The -1 in the middle made it move 1 unit to the right. The 3 at the end made it move up 3 units. So notice it even makes sense for our vertex. It went from 0 to 1, 3. It moved over to the right 1, up 3 units, and it also flipped over. So even if you forget the chart, you can look at the vertex and you can kind of pick out what it's done. Alright, so let's do this one. So go ahead and graph the original and graph the transformation, and let's talk about what's happened. Okay, So at the beginning, it had a vertex of 0, 0. That's where it started. And then over here, it definitely starts at 0, -4. So definitely something has happened. And then notice that there are 2 numbers in this one. So I want you to figure out if you can decide whether the 3 is A, or if it's H, or if it's K, what is it, and what is the 4? So I'm going to give you just a second to think about it and see if you can figure it out. Okay, so here's what it is. The 3 is going to be represented by the B because it's inside that square root, but it's right in front of the X value. So this is one we haven't done yet. And then the -4 is at the very end. It's outside of the radical, so that's going to be a K value. So now we just look at our chart. It says, if B is greater than 1, then it is compressed horizontally. So compressed horizontally. And that makes sense because if you look at it, it definitely seems like it's not the same size that it was. And then since the K is a -4, anytime it's negative, it's going to move down 4 units. And just think about, does that make sense with the vertex? It went from 0, 0 to 0, -4. Yes, it went down 4 units. This one only had 2 things happening in the transformation because we only had 2 numbers we were looking at. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I think it's kind of hard picking out whether you're talking about A, B, H, or K. That just takes a little time and practice. And then just looking at the chart and figuring it out. Sometimes just looking at the graph is kind of hard to see what happened and people get mixed up. Okay, so there'll be some practice problems for you to try. You can email me, you can schedule a Google Meet. If you're on campus, you can come by and see me, I can help you. Or you can just hit me up in the Remind app. So, bye!